Genshin Impact is the only game where I've gone all the way. C6R5 characters, high-end speedrun ambitions, boxes of merch, and more soundtrack albums purchased than I care to admit sitting in my library. This isn't your usual Genshin review. This is closer to a retrospective, a look back at what the game feels like from a mega-whale's perspective. I'm not here to give a score or a buying guide. I'm here to talk about what Genshin looks and feels like after years of playing and whaling. I'm a mega whale and a speedrunner. This is not financial advice, and I will be speaking candidly and honestly about what the game feels like when you push it this far. Hello and welcome. I am Lionmight. I'm a professional composer, music producer, and dedicated Genshin whale enjoyer. Two things made me comfortable going all in on Genshin. First, the studio's track record of long-term support structure, and the way the game's banner systems are built around eventual guarantees rather than endless uncertainty. Limited character banners use pity, guarantees, and newer systems like capturing radiance that can soften some of the variance on featured characters. And the weapon banner's epitomized path give you a defined endpoint for chasing a specific weapon. That matters. If I'm investing this passionately, I want to believe both in the longevity of the world and in the predictability of the systems attached to it. Second, I genuinely love the game. The way it looks, the way it sounds, the way characters feel to play, and how naturally it fits into my daily life. That combination, long-term trust, and personal attachment is why this is the game I chose to go all in on. From here, I'm now talking to people who already understand this world on a deeper level. If terms like C6R5, rotations, abyss cycle, or dire speedruns mean something to you, you're in the right place. I'm going to walk through story, art and character design, music, the gacha system, and finally, combat, before ending on where that leaves me with Genshin as a whole. Story is where my purchasing power matters the least, but it's also the reason I cared enough to whale in the first place. What pulled me in wasn't just the plot. It was the treatment of this breathtaking, immersive fictional world Hoyoverse has created. A world where gods live among humans, where immortals and strange magical creatures exist as part of everyday life, where power itself, visions, elements, is something granted, not freely taken. And then you arrive as something completely outside of that system. A descender, a traveler with no vision, no place in the rules of this world, guided only by a companion who is somehow even more mysterious than you are. Paimon has been with us from the very beginning, and we still don't fully understand what she is. That alone creates a quiet tension under everything. The structure of traveling across 7 nations, each shaped by its own god called archons, is one of the most compelling narrative frameworks I've experienced. Each region is a philosophy, a way of life under divine influence, and every arc builds toward meeting that nation's archon and understanding what they represent. Each major region stretches across roughly a year of real time, almost like a season of TV. It hasn't always been perfect. Early pacing could be uneven, and some in-engine cutscenes didn't quite match the emotional weight they were aiming for. But when Genshin hits its peak, especially in its pre-rendered cinematics, it hits incredibly hard. The Dvalin dragon battle at the beginning, Raiden Shogun's majestic presence, the massive confrontations with Moika and the Abyss, the resurrection of Columbina. These are moments where everything pops off. More importantly, story is what made spending feel emotionally justified at all. I didn't start by looking at damage numbers. I started by caring about who these people were, where they came from, and what they were fighting for. If I didn't care about these characters, I wouldn't spend a dime on them. The narrative isn't just content to be cleared. It's the reason why some banners felt non-negotiable and others never really interested me. That emotional connection is what turned Genshin from a game I play into a world I'm willing to invest in. Tevat as a fictional world is incredibly well realized. Each region carries a strong identity down to the smallest environmental details. It feels intentional. It feels lived in. Character design builds on that. Strong silhouettes, detailed outfits, and visual storytelling embedded in every element. Before I even cared about kits or DPS charts, I cared about faces, outfit designs, voice acting, characterization, and the feeling I got from a character just standing still on screen. You don't pull because of numbers alone. You pull because you already like the character, and the numbers just make you feel better about it. That connection extended beyond the game for me. Figures, prints, collectibles. I've basically been wailing outside the game, purely because the designs resonated enough to want them in my real space. The upside is lasting attachment. The downside, if you would even call it a downside at all, is how easily I like this character can turn into, apparently I needed a small shrine for them to. Still, the art direction remains one of Genshin's strongest pillars. It consistently carries the experience, and it's often the very first contract the game makes with you. Here is someone worth caring about. In any piece of media, films, TV shows, video games, music is the emotional glue. It's the internal voice of the world, the thing that quietly ties everything together when the visuals and the gameplay are busy doing their own jobs. For me, that's exactly what Genshin's music is, the inner life of Tevat. Even when you strip away difficulty or when a quest is moving sluggishly, the soundtrack is still working its magic in the background. It tells you when a place is safe or dangerous, when a moment is solemn or playful, when you should lean in and pay attention. That's why I didn't just wail on characters. I basically started wailing on the OST too. At some point, I realized my receipts weren't just Primo Gems. They were soundtrack albums too. Owning those in my playlist feels like owning the emotional spine of the game, not just its surface. From the start, they set a new standard for what a gacha soundtrack could be, and Yu Peng Chen's early scores in particular laid down an indelible blueprint for how this fictional world should sound. Just as John Williams set the musical language for Star Wars or Harry Potter, Yu Peng Chen's writing defined the emotional language of Tevat so strongly that even as newer regions arrive and more composers stepped in, you can still hear that original DNA running through everything. And it's not just in-game music. Hoyoverse does not skimp on promotional tracks either. Character trailers, Archon teasers, region previews, so many of those themes have broken out as standalone community favorites. There are pieces where you hear 2 seconds and immediately picture that trailer shot burned into your brain. Across all of that, the range is huge. Full orchestral climaxes, small ensemble and poignant piano solo tracks, region-flavored writing, jazz-tinged harmony, rock-driven battle cues, straight-up dubstep, and EDM. There's always something that fits whatever mood you're in. Just as you're in the middle of a story climax, wandering through a quiet village, or not even playing and just letting the playlist run in the background. The result is that even if one day I stopped logging in to Genshin entirely, I'd still keep a lot of this music in rotation. In that sense, wailing on the OST might actually be the most future-proof spending I've done in this game. And yes, at this point, wailing clearly includes my music library. The running joke that Hoyoverse is really a music label that happens to publish some free games on the side doesn't feel that far off. And as someone who lives on both the composer side and the player side, I mean that as a compliment. Let's now talk about Genshin's Gacha system, an essential topic for whales. Around the world, people react to Gacha very differently. In a lot of East Asian markets, China, Japan, parts of Southeast Asia, Gacha-style monetization has been around for so long that it's just seen as a normal way games make money, like card packs or prize machines. In the West, especially North America and much of Europe, Gacha and loot boxes are much more likely to be talked about in the same breath as gambling, predatory design, and problem spending. Both angles come from real concerns and real experiences. Some people absolutely do get hurt by these systems. Others treat them like any other hobby that can quietly become expensive if you let it. For me, Gacha lives in that second category. It sits on the same mental shelf as cameras, guitar pedals, fashion, or cars. Something that can be cheap or very expensive depending on how far you decide to go. And you have to walk into it with your eyes wide open, fully aware of what you're getting into. From that perspective, I think Genshin's specific implementation is one of the fairer ones out there for spenders. The combination of pity, the featured character guarantee structure, newer mechanics like capturing radiance on limited character banners, and epitomized path on the weapon banners means that if you are willing to pay the full price of admission, there is an actual ceiling where you will get the character or weapons you are chasing, either at that ceiling or earlier if you're lucky. That ceiling is not cheap, but it is visible. You're not throwing money into a bottomless slot machine and praying. On the weapon side, I actually appreciate how epitomized path works. It can still be brutally expensive if you are forcing a specific signature weapon refinement, but at least there is a defined finish line instead of endless uncertainty. I would rather have a painful guarantee than a situation where I could spend the same amount and still walk away with nothing. What I can't really speak to is the free-to-play economy. My experience there is limited, and my relationship with the system is fundamentally different. If I want a character, I swipe, I pull, and I'm done. I'm not counting every Primogem or planning months around one banner, so I don't want to pretend that I can give some deeply informed F2P breakdown from lived experience. So all I can honestly say is this. As a hobby, Gacha is something you have to walk into with your eyes open. From where I'm standing, Genshin treats that decision with more clarity and structure than many other games I've tried. It still monetizes attachment, and it still absolutely knows how to tempt you into just one more constellation. But it doesn't hide the rules, and for me, that transparency is what makes it acceptable as one of my expensive hobbies, rather than something I feel the need to apologize for. At a high level of investment, Genshin's difficulty curve in most content becomes trivial. Enemies melt. Weekly bosses turn into routine. And domains feel like short, repeatable bursts instead of obstacles. The game stops asking, "Can you win this fight?" and quietly assumes the answer is always yes. That doesn't mean the combat system is shallow. It starts from a really approachable foundation. Mid-paced real-time action, readable enemy patterns, and a 4-character team system built around elemental reactions. But once you've poured enough resources into your account, the baseline question changes from, "Can I clear this?" to, "What fun or weird combat tactic can I use for this battle?" In the overworld, combat turns into a sandbox playground. Domains become a matter of trivial efficiency. Every second you shave off is more resources and more of your session left over for story, exploration, or just vibes. In Spiral Abyss, combat becomes optimization. Getting 36 stars isn't really the question anymore. The interesting part is how you get there. Which teams do you bring? How many rotations each chamber takes? How tightly can you shorten the field time of your off-fielders to maximize elemental reactions for your on-fielders? Abyss turns into a trivial benchmark you can push against, sometimes comfortably, sometimes as sweaty as you can, depending on what you're in the mood for. For a long time, that was the pattern. The game remained relatively easy for my account. New characters, new teams, new rotations kept being discovered, but nothing really challenged that baseline. I was refining comfort and efficiency more than I was being forced to struggle with the content. And then in 5.7, Stygian Onslaught changed that. For the first time in a long time, the game actually pushed back in a way that felt aimed at players like me. Not because it was impossible, but because it finally assumed a certain level of knowledge, execution, and account strength. And then asked for more on top of that. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just bring overbuilt units and press buttons. Positioning, timing, invulnerability windows, rotation discipline, and raw familiarity with their characters all mattered again. Stygian is the moment where my whaling stopped being mostly about comfort and expression and started to feel systematically connected to a real technical ceiling. It gave me a reason to look at my account the way a speedrunner looks at their route. Where are the weak links? Which teams need to be rebuilt from the ground up? Which characters and weapons are worth pushing further because they actually open up new doors through this content? It was the first time in years that the game reminded me very clearly that there is still room to grow, even here. It was breathtaking. Underneath all of that is something Genshin does extremely well: character kit design. Most characters fall into familiar roles: on-field DPS, off-field damage dealers, and supports. But the important split for a whale is simple. How far can they push the damage ceiling, and how fast can they clear bosses? Pure on-field DPS are the most intoxicating in the short term and the most fragile over time. They make for spectacular clips and highlight moments. But their job is very narrow: be on-field and hit hard. When a future character arrives who simply does that job better or more comfortably, it's easy for the older one to slide into the background unless you're very attached to them. Off-field damage dealers and supports, especially strong ones, age much more gracefully. A character who can sit off-field and keep reactions going, or who can consistently buff and protect your team, doesn't stop being useful when the meta shifts. Every new DPS becomes another partner for their kit. They are the connective tissue between eras of the game. The real long-term winners, though, are the hybrids that do both. Sub-DPS supports that bring significant damage and meaningful utility without needing to hog much on-field time. They knit together the on-field and off-field halves of your team. They expand what kind of comps you can build, and they stay relevant through a lot of balance changes because they're doing several jobs at once. From a mega whale perspective, those hybrids are the best long-term investments. When I decide to go all in on a character like that, it doesn't feel like I'm investing in 1 or 2 Stygian cycles. It feels like I'm investing in the overall health and flexibility of my account for years. And then above all of that, there's speedrunning. This is where combat becomes a personal sport. Every constellation, every weapon, every artifact roll turns into raw material for precision. You're not chasing clear or fail anymore. You're chasing cleaner, faster boss kills, tighter rotations, smarter use of reaction windows, better control of on-field time and off-field uptime. The exact same elemental reaction system that feels mid-paced and approachable at a casual level turns into a very technical puzzle of rotation timings, invincibility frames, cooldown management, and team build synergy when you start optimizing it to that degree. It's exhilarating. Whaling also opens up options that don't look obvious from the outside. Once your account reaches a certain level of strength, even unconventional teams become fully viable. Characters you'd normally bench, older units people wrote off, or teams built purely around a specific fantasy can still perform comfortably because your foundation is already so strong. You have enough depth and flexibility to play for expression, experimentation, and style. The more tools you own, the more ways you have to keep combat feeling fresh. That, to me, is the heart of Genshin's combat at this level. A system that starts out friendly and casual, but hides enough depth under the hood that if you choose to push it, with both investment and effort, it will push back in a way that feels surprisingly technical and rewarding. After everything, story, art, music, gacha, combat, why am I still here? Part of it is trust. This is a long-term, live service fictional world, and the systems around it are predictable enough that going deep into it doesn't feel like pure chaos. The banner rules may be expensive, but they are built around eventual outcomes rather than infinite uncertainty. But more importantly, it's because I still enjoy being here. I adore the characters. I admire the music. I love the feeling of a perfect run. I like refining something over time, whether that's a rotation, a team comp, or apparently, my Genshin-themed bookshelf and playlists. Genshin at this level isn't a completely different game. It's the same experience, just seen from another angle. At this point, Tevat stops being something you're trying to beat. It becomes a world you've chosen to live in. And for me, that world is Genshin Impact. Now that I've shared my candid view of Genshin from a giga-whale's perspective, I'd love to hear about your own experiences in the comments. Whale or not, all perspectives are welcome.